Hello everyone. So today we're going to be looking at Moscovici's famous study on minority influence and whether a small group can change the opinions of a larger group. So let's get into it. Okay, so before we get into the actual study, let's talk about why Moscovici even did this study. Most psychologists at that time were interested in majority influence, basically how a larger group can make one person confirm. We've already seen that in studies like ASH, but Moscovici had a different question. He wondered whether a small minority could actually influence a larger majority, and even if they could, what makes them successful? So that's what this study was all about. So Moscovici had three main aims here. First, he wanted to see whether a minority could influence a majority at all. Second, he wanted to find out whether being consistent makes a minority more influential. And finally, he wanted to know if people were genuinely changing their perceptions or if they were just saying the answers to fit in. Now, let's look at who took part. The participants were female students studying subjects like law, liberal arts, and social sciences. They were placed into groups of six. In each group, there were two confederates, meaning that they were secretly working with the researcher, and four genuine participants who had no idea what was going on. So here's what happened. The participants were told that this was a color perception study. They were shown a series of blue slides and had to say what color they thought each sides were and also judge its brightness. Before the experiment started, everyone took a vision test just to make sure there weren't any eyesight issues affecting the results. Now, this part is where things get interesting. In the first experiment, the two confederates consistently called the blue slides green. And when I say consistently, I mean every single time. Imagine sitting in a room and hearing two people confidently saying a blue slide is green over and over again. Moscovici wanted to see whether that consistency would eventually influence the rest of the group. After that, Moscovici wanted to take things a step further. Maybe people were only agreeing publicly because of social pressure. So, in the second experiment, participants judged the colors privately. This allowed researchers to see whether the minority had actually changed how people perceive the colors, rather than just changing what they said out loud. Next came experiment 3. This time, the confederates weren't consistent anymore. Sometimes they called the sides green, the other times they called them blue. So basically, their message was mixed. The question was, if consistency is so important, what happens when the minority becomes inconsistent? To make sure the results weren't actually due to minority influence, Moscovici also included a control group. This group has no confederates at all. Almost everyone identified the slides as blue, which showed that the slides themselves weren't confusing. Any green responses in the experimental groups were most likely caused by the influence of the minority. What did they find? Well, in the consistent condition, about 32% of the participants agreed with the minority at least once, and there were 8.42% green responses overall. But when the minority became inconsistent, agreement dropped dramatically just to 1.25%. So right away, we can see that consistency makes a huge difference. So what can we take away from this study? First, minorities can influence majorities. Second, consistency is one of the most important factors in minority influence. And third, minority influence can lead to genuine changes in the way people think and perceive things, not just changes in what they say. One key term you need to know is perceptual code. This basically means the way we interpret or perceive information. Moscovici argued that a consistent minority can actually change the majority's perceptual code, meaning people may start seeing things differently rather than simply pretending to agree. There are a few strands we can talk about. One is the high level of control. Everything was standardized, which means that researchers could be more confident that the minority influence caused the results. Another strand is that the study is easy to replicate because the procedure was carefully controlled. Of course, there are some limitations too. The sample only included female students, so we can't automatically generalize the findings to everyone. The study also took place in a laboratory, which isn't very realistic. And finally, there were ethical issues because participants were deceived about the true purpose of the study. If you are revising for the exams, the biggest thing to remember is a consistent minority is much more influential than an inconsistent one. That's really the key message from Moscovici's study. Hopefully, this video makes the study a lot easier to understand, and good luck with your revision.